go. A slow and steady surrender. Haha. Like I said, we're working surrender this month, and I'll tell you, I'm really working it. All right. So this month this year we're looking at the courage it takes to step into living a spiritual life. We realize that this is not the path that most people follow, to engage with life from the spiritual perspective. That most people are running through their life trying to make it work, trying to get as much as they can and get the structures of their life together, and we get on that hamster wheel that just runs, right, that just keeps going. But what we're trying to do is to take a step back and to look at how this spiritual adventure is allowing each of us to step into our power, to step up and give our gifts, and to allow ourselves to be supported by God. And in order to live that way, it takes some courage. It takes some strength of heart. It takes some courage, because not everybody sees the same way that we see. Not everybody acknowledges that this is important. But what I can tell you is that this living a spiritual life, committing yourself to deepening your relationship with God and being a channel of divine light in the world, what it does is it allows you to create a completely fulfilling, full, loving experience of life. There's peace here when we live this way. There is divine support here when we live this way. When we allow ourselves to be guided and supported by this presence that I call God, and you can call it whatever you want, then all things start to align in our lives and we flow. And so today I'm talking about a slow and steady surrender. Now this came about because I was inspired by a number of things that have been happening lately. It feels like everything's converging to support me in sharing with you what we're talking about. And let me tell you, everything. So think about surrender, and I'll tell you everything I'm experiencing from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. It's all about surrendering. I'm like, come on, what's the date? It's the 24th. Okay, we're almost done. Although I have to tell you, we're going into faith next month, so there we go. We're ready. I'm ready. Courage. We can do this. So anyways, a couple of weeks back, we had our Centers for Spiritual Living convention, which was a virtual convention, and some of you may have been here for some of our sessions. And on Thursday night that week, I participated in the event at Seaside, and one of the main speakers there was Dr. Roger Teal. Now, Dr. Roger Teal has just retired from a 42-year ministry career at the mega church in religious science in Denver, Mile High. And so it was kind of a big deal to hear him like the week he retired, right? Like he retired on Sunday and then he came to Encinitas. And one of the things that he said stuck with me, which I have to tell you is a minister's dream. It's a minister's dream when something that you say sticks with someone so much that they chew it over and over and over again. You need to know I love when that happens, so come back and tell me if that ever happens for you. He said that life calls us again and again to surrender. That life calls us again and again to surrender, which we know, right? Like that's not anything new. It's not anything way out of bounds here of what we talk about and think about all the time. But what, for all of us who are, wherever you are on your path here, in Science of Mind, we usually focus on creating your life. That we are empowered to create our life, that our thoughts and our words, our beliefs, and how we step forward in life, we create it. Let's go out there and get it, right? We're a bunch of doers, right? And so the fact that what he's saying is that life itself is calling us to let go of that over and over and over again gave me pause to find out where that lives in this experience, where that lives in our philosophy. And so I sat with that for a little while and realized that what the surrender is that we're being called to let go, to trust deeper and deeper, to allow what wants to come forward to be. And that's really important because what happens is that when we try to create our life from our limited sense, from our limited perspective, and I don't mean limited in a bad way, most of us are pretty awake, relatively. You know, we're relatively awake, we're relatively engaged, we understand how this process works. But we can only see from the perspective that we've got. And we are being called to surrender from that higher perspective that God knows that we can do it. I was thinking back to an experience I had a number of years ago. I was on a minister's retreat up in Montana. And one of the things that was going to culminate in the retreat was we were going to end with Dr. Christian has a house in Montana, and it's by one of the, I should know what it's some national park there, that we were going to, some famous national park that we were going to go hike in. I forgot what it was because that wasn't the point. But so the week was going to culminate with this hike with all of his ministers, all of his assistant ministers, and he was going to take us up all the mountain. But what happened one by one during the week, something started happening to the ministers. One of the ministers' husbands literally fell off the porch on a rocking chair, and so they were out of the hike, right? So they weren't going to hike, and I was like, and the wife had to stay with the husband. So I was like, okay. So then it was the three of us and Dr. Christian, oh, by the way, at the time I wasn't really exercising, and I wasn't really interested in taking a 4-hour hike. It was not anything I really wanted to do or anything, and so I was like, okay, how do I get out of this, you know? And then the next day, one of the other ministers had heart palpitations. She started to have a heart, and we had to take her to the hospital the next day. This is a minister's retreat, right? We had to take her to the little hospital in Kalispell to get her checked out. So she was out of the hike, And I'm like, okay, 2 of the 5 of us are done. We're done. Sorry, let's just row around the lake a little bit more, And Christian's like, we're doing it. And I was like, oh. So I got together with my other leftover minister there and said, hey, the 2 of us revolt, he can't make us do this. And I got with her and I said, okay, we need a safe word. Let's come up with a safe word. And when we come up with our safe word and we say it, then I'll hurt my ankle. And she's like, okay. But, and I said, I'll try. But so I was trying to get out of it. So 5 o'clock in the morning, I get knock on my door. Christian wakes me up. And I put on my long johns and my hiking clothes. And he hands me a cup of coffee. And so what the word was that we decided was pancakes. And so I said to Reverend Maury, I said, if I talk about pancakes, one of us has to twist an ankle. Pancakes, ankle, okay? And so we start hiking, and we get there, and it's snowing, and it's freezing. And it was in November, and so it's actually snowing. And we're going up to this lake up at the top of the mountain there. And so what happened was, so we start. After trying to convince some rangers to take us up on the 4-wheelers that they and he said, no, we're not allowed to take you up the hill, ma'am. He said, I have to go up and make sure there's no bears so they don't get you. And I'm like, come on, really? And so what happened was we started hiking, and the first part of the trail was literally like that incline, right? And so I go for literally 90 seconds, and I'm like, God, I would love some pancakes! Pancakes! And Lori's like, I'm like, pancakes! And Christian just looks at me, he's like, I'll get you some pancakes after the hike. So I surrendered to the fact that I was doing it, right? And we start going, and what Christian did was, and I talk about this over and over again, this is 10 years ago, and I remind him often of how amazing it was, because he knew I could do it. He wasn't going to take my crap, excuse my language, he wasn't going to take my baloney, and he was just going to let it happen because he knew it was worth it, and that I was much more capable than I thought I was. And so 2 hours later, we're up at this mountain lake at a place that I never would have seen, in this glorious space. And I sat down on a rock and ate my apple and was like, oh, yeah, right, surrender. Oh, yeah, right. I'm more capable than I think I am. And I think that that's what life is trying to do for us. It's reminding us, it's pulling us into a place of pulling out what we're capable of without taking our whining. Life is not going to take our complaining. It's not going to put up with our whining. It's not going to put up with us thinking that we're not capable of what we are capable of. Life knows. Life, God, love, whatever the universe, whatever you want to say, knows you so completely that it's not going to allow you to live a small life. It's going to pull out your greatness. It's going to pull out who you are. And so, in this whole idea, thinking back over the meandering path of my life, I can see that each and every time I would get used to something, or I would settle into it, life would pull me out of it, right? And just think of any parent in the room who finally got their kid to sleep before midnight, right? When they were toddlers. Anybody have, every time I would think that we finally got it together with how my schedule and how things are going to work, then what happens next? It changes. right? Life never lets us sit in one place too long without allowing something else to come forward. And so I knew that there were times when in my life where I was in grief because someone that I loved dearly stepped out of my life, right? Whether they transitioned into the next adventure of their souls, or whether they moved to the other side of the country, or whether we just stopped being close. And I was sad about that because I love my friends and I wanted to keep them in my life. Maybe it's a job or a situation. We have those moments in time that just feel so perfect, right? Give me a nod if you're with me. You with me? Okay. And so, but when they change, we go through a process of feeling like it's a loss. And then we can struggle against life, and we can think that life's out to get us, or it doesn't want us to be happy, or I finally got my fill in the word together, and here it is that it's all fallen apart. But we need to trust the fact that what's coming is greater for us. We need to trust that, yes, we have these special, beautiful moments in time. One of the biggest losses that was hard for us to deal with was when our kids grew up, right? Your kids grow up, and they're adults, and they go off and have their own life, but I miss them. I want to keep them close. I understand that whole family compound idea now, much more, you know. I never wanted it with my parents, so I guess I understand how they felt, because I kind of ran, you know. But to strike out and have my own life. And now as our kids are striking out and having their own lives, all I want is to have them back, right? And so allowing these changes to happen, allowing what needs to happen, what wants to unfold to happen, without us feeling like we are being punished, without feeling like life is out to get us. We have to realize that when there's space for something, the divine fills it in. And if we open our hearts and allow ourselves to commune and connect with this life, it fills it in with joy. It fills it in with love. And all those things that we think we've lost are really still right there. They just look different. But because we're trained to look and see how we want it to be, sometimes we miss it. We miss the fact that we are given what we want. So this is the kind of talk it's going to be. So this is a little bit of a be grateful for each moment talk, a little you never know when things are going to change talk, a little bit of you got it pretty good now talk, and then it's only getting better if you let it talk. So that's kind of where we're headed, and I know you know we all know of that. I've been really blessed. I've been teaching a new class here at the center for our practitioners, and they've been very sweet to go along with me with this. I've done a speaking class for them, and so you will, over the next, they don't really know this yet, but or I guess they do now, but that over the next few months, our practitioners will be sharing more of their messages with you. They're amazing. Our practitioners are amazing. And I was also inspired this week by one of the talks that we heard. As we've come to the last 2 weeks, and they've been giving their final sermons. And so I was inspired by a talk given by our practitioner, the day-to-day Tina Folds. And she said, we're born with all we need to succeed in this life. So when we come into this life, we already have all that we need within us. Each of us is implanted with that God seed, that divine spark. And that is the path for us to fully evolve and become who we've come here to be. Each of us in our own individual way. And so we think it's about getting an education and figuring out from the outside and learning all this stuff and, you know, acquiring skills, all that stuff from the outside. It's all good and it helps, and yes, we need to do that. But the truth is, you have within you everything that you need from the moment you came into this life to live a fulfilling, full, joyful life. To be satisfied. To feel complete and whole. You've had that from the moment you were conceived, never mind born, and I won't get into that debate. I'm not touching that one. But the truth is that you've always had what you've needed. But we convince ourselves that we don't know. And we convince ourselves that we're limited. And we convince ourselves that we're out on our own and we better figure it out. But what we should be doing is turning within and allowing that divine intuition and that divine wisdom that's alive within us to guide our path. Moving from the head to the heart is what a lot of people in this movement talk about. It's moving from the place of the ego, saying, don't do that or you'll look foolish. Be careful of that. They may reject you. You better not be yourself. It's not a safe space to be. versus knowing who you are and just surrendering into that and allowing that to be your truth. The other thing that I was inspired by when Dr. Teal was speaking a couple weeks ago, he was talking about butterflies. And I don't even think he realized what we've been going through here in Southern California. I don't think he had any idea of this painted lady migration that's been going on over the last month and a half. And I was amazed at that. And so I heard him talk about butterflies, and then I went home the next day and I sat in my backyard amongst thousands of butterflies, right, that have been migrating from the U.S.-Mexico border up to Northern California. It happens every spring, and then in the fall they migrate back, right? And this year, because of all the rain that we've had, and because of this amazing super bloom that I still haven't seen, and most people in Temecula are trying to avoid the traffic, so we haven't gone to see yet. But because of that, because of this super bloom, and there's so much out there for the caterpillars to eat and thrive, and there's so many leaves and flowers for the butterflies to lay their eggs, that this has been billions of butterflies have been migrating through our area in the last couple of weeks. And so I was sitting there in my backyard watching, I'll give you the picture. I was watching my chickens and sitting with the butterflies, is what I was doing. Because those silly chickens will get out if they can. So I have to keep going. But anyway, so here's these butterflies coming up the hill and over and just coming like endless waves. And as I was thinking about it, I was remembering what I know about butterflies. And they are the ultimate example of surrender for us. But in an interesting way. So as we know, a butterfly starts as a caterpillar, and it has one role: to eat. I kind of like that. It'd be great to don't just be a caterpillar, right? So the caterpillar is born, and all it needs to do is eat. It has this desire within it to eat. It just eats like triple its weight, and it grows and grows and grows. And what happens in the caterpillar is that there's something called an imaginal cell. And the imaginal cell is the one that begins the process of its transformation. Dr. Roger talked about how the caterpillar exists until it hits a place of critical unworkability. A place of critical unworkability. I love that. Have you ever hit a place of critical unworkability in your life? Yeah. And what do we do when we hit a place of critical unworkability? We keep going. Right? We fight it. No, I'm going to make this work. Think about, and I always joke about the relationships of my 20s, right? Like, I'm going to make this work. It's going to work. It's going to work. It's not going to work. You got to let it go, right? Or a job situation that you're just like determined. I am going, and what happens? You end up getting fired, which is the best gift you could ever have, right? And so we work so hard until we get to a place of critical unworkability, and that's what happens to the caterpillars. They eat and eat and eat until they're about to pop, right? And then they move into this next phase where these imaginal cells start to show up. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first heard about these and how they work, I always thought that it was a lovely nature, smooth and easy, and everything just happens, and the caterpillar turns into a butterfly and flies out, right? And that it should be a beautiful, easy process. Let me tell you, that is not the truth. And I think it speaks a lot to our experience. Because what happens is these imaginal cells start to pop up within the caterpillar, and you know what happens? Its immune system starts to destroy them. It fights against it. The caterpillar's cells think that they're intruders because they vibrate at a different level. That they resonate and they vibrate at a different frequency than the rest of the caterpillar, so it thinks it's a foreign invader, and they try to eat them. But what happens is this: life will not be denied, because they start popping up more and more and more, and there's too many imaginal cells for the caterpillar's immune system to overtake them. So you know what it does? It surrenders. It surrenders to the process. Even a caterpillar is resistant to becoming a butterfly. Okay? That's important. Even a caterpillar is resistant to becoming a butterfly. It fights its resistance. How many of us operate constantly in a place of resistance of becoming stepping into our greatness. How often are we just fighting against ourselves instead of allowing the process? But you know what? That God seed within us is like those imaginal cells because it keeps popping out. It just keeps coming, and it will not be denied. And so there's a moment that we come to the realization, I need to surrender. I need to let it be. I need to step forward. I need to make a change. Sometimes we don't know what that change is. I don't think that caterpillar has any idea what it's going to feel like to be a butterfly. But I can tell you it's going to like it, right? I wish it would know that. And I always say that so the process is the caterpillar finds a safe space and it becomes a chrysalis, and then what happens is it turns to mush. The caterpillar actually turns to goo. All right? And so it cannot be comfortable to turn to goo. It cannot be comfortable to let go of everything it has known, the structure and the process that it has known, to turn into that cosmic soup again, to make something new. But I bet each and every one of you know what that feels like. I bet there's been a moment in your life when you feel like you've turned to goo. You know, that you've had to let go of everything that you know, everything that was safe, everything that was handleable. Because let me tell you, that caterpillar is really comfortable climbing on those leaves and eating that stuff. That's great, that's life, that's living, right? But it has no idea what amazing magnificence is waiting for it on the other side. And so it turns to goo. And then what happens is that the new life comes forward. So I went back to Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, and this week I was in with our practitioner 2 class a little bit, and they're getting prepped for their exams coming up in the next month or so. So I was spending some time in the glossary of the science of mind, and this is what I came with, the divine urge. The divine urge is the inner desire to express life, the desire to do and accomplish more, to be more completely happy, prosperous, and well. Is right. It is part of that eternally progressive spirit of unfoldment, and we should surrender the entire situation to the working of intelligence. Notice it's with a capital I, that means God, with the conviction that intelligence will use us as a perfect channel. I love that. I love that. There is a divine urge within each one of us to express who we've come here to be. There's a divine urge, and it's different for each and every one of us, but it's our urge of living, to live fully, to embrace this experience of life, to love and to give ourselves out to the world, to somebody else, to our families, to this life. And that urge will not go away. Those are those imaginal cells that are not going to let you stay small, are not going to let you stay in your bed with your pillow over your head when you're going through a rough time. It's that thing that's going to support you in getting up and moving forward and starting to create and transform into that next evolution, which is the butterfly. You get to fly. I know I've said that like 10 times this month, but you do. You get to fly. And how cool is that when we surrender? But we have to stop fighting our resistance. At some point, we need to let go of being a caterpillar and allow the transformational process to transform us into a butterfly. There's a man named Reverend Forrest Church. He was the senior minister of the Unitarian Church of All Souls in New York City. And he said this: when cast into the depths to survive, we must first let go of things that will not save us. Then we must reach out for the things that can. And that spoke to me so deeply from this place of allowing the divine urge, because so often when we are called to transform, when we're called to change, we go back to what we know is safe. We go back to that which we know, and unfortunately, for most of us, those are limited ideas of who we are and of what life is. If we fall back into that comfort level when things start to shake around the edges, when we're called to start to liquefy, I don't know what word to use here, but when we start to move into that mush stage, instead of just embracing what's coming, embracing that newness, that question, that living in that place of not knowing all of it, we fall back on what's comfortable. And unfortunately, that never allows the caterpillar to really transform. It get stuck in the process. We'd be stuck in the process. I was inspired by my dog this morning. My husband and my dog come out every day to say goodbye to me when I leave on Sunday mornings, and they help me to the car. And I was backing up and I was watching Daisy, who's a little Maltipoo, and she has walked out in my driveway 5,000 times at least, right? But every time she walks out into the driveway, she's so excited about what she's going to see, and she can't wait to see what's around the corner. And oh my goodness, she's so excited, and her tail's going, and her ears are up, and she's prancing around like a little princess because she's a little princess, and so excited for life. And that reminds me on a day-to-day basis that that's how we greet our day. We can step into the unknown of what's happening in that day and greet it with joy and excitement, because you know what, Daisy knows that life's got some surprises for her in those bushes. And there's some rabbits there that she could chase, or some little lizards or something. And so I know for each one of us that we are connected to this wild life. So this beautiful moment that we're in with these butterflies coming through and those super bloom and the rains, and it reminds us that we're living around nature. We are surrounded by nature. We are part of it. And this wild life is here for us. And so it's the same thing. You have that divine spark within you. You have that wisdom that is there for you. But we have to ask ourselves, are we listening to our limitations, or are we listening to our possibilities? Are we allowing this universe that is in constant dialogue with our souls to guide us? Or are we trying to figure out how to make it happen in a way that I'm not stepping out too far of my comfort zone? We don't get to stay in our comfort zone and live a full life. We get to step out and shine our light and be the presence and engage in life. And I'll tell you, that's where fulfillment comes. Living a purposeful, engaged life is where we find fulfillment, and we find freedom, and we find peace. But it takes being courageous enough to allow us to surrender that which we think we're supposed to be doing. So surrender is a lifelong process of allowing the divine, and not the ego, to be the center of our lives. The other thing that I love so much, as some of you know, I'm a little bit of a James Taylor fan. And this week I had the great honor of performing a wedding for a couple of our congregants. And they picked this James Taylor song because I asked John to sing it a bunch of months ago when they were here. And so it's The Secret of Life. And so this has been going through my head, and I don't, again, you're at a church where I'm not quoting the Bible today, I'm quoting James Taylor. So that's where we're going. Just as wise, I need to say. And so this is what he says in this song. He says, the secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. No, I'm not going to sing it. Any fool can do it. There ain't nothing to it. Nobody knows how we got to the top of the hill. But since we're on our way down, we might as well enjoy the ride. He goes on to say, isn't it a lovely ride? Sliding down, gliding down. Try not to try too hard. It's just a lovely ride. So can you feel the energy of that? Can you feel the feeling of that? Has your life been a lovely ride? Can you allow it to be a lovely ride? Not attaching to how you think it's supposed to be, but allowing that infinite wisdom to guide you and bring forward what it is that you've come here to experience. Our whole life is about surrendering over and over and over again. So we're called to surrender our fear, and we're called to surrender our limitation, and we're called to surrender our beliefs that keep us held back. But we're also called sometimes to surrender the things that we love. There are certain things that we love in our life that are beautiful and wonderful, but are limited. And so yes, sometimes those friendships that have been around for years and years, but that person can't see you for who you really are, sometimes we need to bless it and let it be. Those situations that don't engage all of our talents and our abilities, don't call us forward to grow and expand, sometimes you need to surrender it and let it go. And step into that question. Step into a place of possibility. Because in that way, you're going to meet you for the first time. You're going to realize, who you truly are and what you're truly capable of. You're going to see yourself as God sees you, that infinite, divine love and light of spirit made manifest in the body that you decided to take on in this life. And so you know what? It is a slow and steady surrender. And we are called over and over again to let go, to let be, to be present here. And I know that as we do that, that transformation happens so much easier, with so much more grace. We open to allowing grace to be in our lives. And then what happens? Again, we get to fly. And so it is.